My husband looked me straight in the eye and said, "I want a son, not her slow little girl." His mother added, "Trade her in before it's too late." And I said nothing. But on Lila's birthday, she gave him a handmade card. He smiled until he opened it and saw what was taped inside. My name is Elena Carter, and for a long time, I thought I had built the life I always wanted. I had a husband who, once upon a time, made me feel special, a beautiful little girl who became the center of my world, and a home that looked picture perfect from the outside. But behind that perfect picture was a growing darkness, one that I didn't fully see coming, and when it arrived, it wasn't directed at me. It was aimed straight at my daughter. Greg and I met when I was 23. He was polished, ambitious, and so confident that it felt contagious. I was working 2 jobs and studying part-time when he swept me off my feet. Within a year, we were engaged. 2 years after that, we bought our first house. When I gave birth to Lila, I thought I had everything. She was this tiny, soft, perfect little person. I remember staring at her in the hospital, thinking I would do anything for her, anything. As Lila grew, it became clear she wasn't hitting milestones the way other kids were. At first, it was subtle. Her speech was delayed, and certain tasks took longer to learn. We saw specialists, went to therapy, did everything we were supposed to do. Eventually, the diagnosis came: mild cognitive delays and speech delay. Not life-altering, not insurmountable, but enough to shift how some people looked at her. Greg changed. The man who once raced home to rock her to sleep now stayed longer at work. He stopped asking about her therapy sessions. He stopped noticing the little wins. When she learned a new word, when she finally mastered buttoning her coat. And then there was his mother, Lorraine. Lorraine had never liked me, though she played polite in public. After Lila's diagnosis, her mask slipped. Comments began. "She's not quite right, is she? You should give Greg another chance at a normal child. You're still young enough. Have a boy this time." I told myself not to take the bait. I told myself Greg would defend us. But as time passed, I heard less support and more silence from him. When I asked him to talk to his mother, he shrugged and said, "She's old-fashioned. Let it go." Then one night, everything changed. Lorraine came over for dinner. Lila had already gone to bed. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard them talking in the living room. Lorraine's voice was sharp. "Greg, you need to think about your future. You're still young. You can have another child, a son, someone who'll carry on your name. You can't waste your life raising her." Then came Greg's voice, quiet, tired. "I want a son, not her slow little girl." I stopped breathing. My hands were still in the soapy water. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles white. The words rang in my ears over and over. I had known things were getting worse, but to hear my own husband say those words, I can't explain the pain and the shame, because I stood there, frozen. I didn't confront him. I didn't run into the room and defend my daughter. I stayed still and silent, a coward in my own home. That night, I barely slept. I watched Lila, curled up beside me, her tiny chest rising and falling. How could he not see what I saw? How could he not love her for exactly who she was? But something inside me shifted. I didn't have the words then, but looking back, I know now. That was the moment I stopped trying to protect my marriage and started focusing on protecting my daughter. Lila's 7th birthday was approaching. She was thrilled. We'd been working on her speech all month so she could say happy birthday to me without stumbling. Greg showed no interest. When I mentioned her party, he barely grunted. Lorraine openly said, "No point celebrating a child like that." But Lila didn't notice. She was too excited. One afternoon, she asked me, "Mommy, can I make Daddy a card?" Every instinct in me screamed no. I wanted to shield her from another disappointment. But when I looked at her face, so full of hope, I just nodded. "Of course, sweetheart." She sat at the kitchen table for an hour, coloring, writing in big, shaky letters. She even asked for tape. When I peeked over, she smiled and said, "It's a secret. Daddy will love it." I nearly cried. She still believed he loved her. I didn't know what she had put inside. But in that moment, I decided to let her give him the card. If Greg had any heart left, maybe this would wake him up. And if not, well, some truths are worth seeing. even if they hurt. I had no idea just how much that card would change everything. I wasn't always this quiet. Not the kind of woman who keeps her head down when someone insults her child, but when you live for too long in a house where your voice doesn't seem to matter, you learn how to disappear. Even while standing in plain sight. That was my life with Greg. When we first met, I believed I'd found someone who saw me. Greg had this magnetic energy. People listened when he spoke. He always seemed to be the one with the answers. I didn't come from much. My father passed when I was young, and my mother, Grace, worked 2 jobs just to get us by. So when Greg pursued me, I fell hard. He promised stability, a future. And for a while, he delivered. We bought a small but charming house in a quiet neighborhood outside of Dallas. I quit my retail job after Lila was born, staying home to raise her while selling handmade crafts on Etsy. Lila was our whole world, or so I thought. She was born 5 weeks early but healthy, tiny fingers, the softest dark curls, a gaze that seemed to understand more than words could say. In those early months, Greg adored her. He'd come home from work, scoop her into his arms, and sing her silly songs. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the life I dreamed about. But as she grew, small differences started to appear. At 2, her speech was behind. Other kids were stringing words together. Lila mostly pointed and made sounds. By 3, she struggled with some fine motor skills. We took her to a developmental specialist, hoping for answers. After a battery of tests and long, exhausting appointments, we finally sat in a small office and heard the words that would change everything. Your daughter has a mild cognitive delay along with a speech delay. She'll need therapy, but with the right support, she can thrive. I remember gripping Greg's hand so tightly it turned white. He didn't squeeze back. In the car ride home, he stared out the window and said flatly, "She's not going to be normal, is she?" That's when I first felt the ground shift beneath us. I threw myself into helping Lila. Speech therapy twice a week, occupational therapy on Fridays. I read every book I could find. My mother, Grace, became my lifeline. "She's still perfect, Elena," she would remind me. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But Greg started pulling away. At first it was small. Working later, missing therapy appointments. Then came the criticism. "Why can't she talk like the other kids? Maybe you're babying her too much." I tried to explain, to share what the therapists were telling me, but every conversation turned into a wall. Then Lorraine began showing up more. She never liked me, not really. Greg was her golden child, and I was the girl from the wrong side of town. After Lila's diagnosis, her disdain sharpened. "She'll never catch up," she said one afternoon while folding laundry in my living room, uninvited as usual. "Greg deserves a normal child, a son, one he can be proud of." I opened my mouth to argue, but Greg walked in at that moment, and instead of defending us, he said nothing, just walked past us and went upstairs. That was the first time I felt truly alone in my marriage. As the months wore on, Greg's patience thinned. He spent more time away from home. When he was home, he barely engaged with Lila. She noticed. Of course she did. One night, she crawled into my lap after dinner and whispered, "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy hug me anymore?" My heart shattered. I kissed her forehead and told her, "Daddy's just tired, sweetie. It's not your fault. You are so loved." But it was a lie. I spent many nights lying awake, wondering how we had ended up here. My once loving husband now treated our daughter like a burden, and the woman who should have been her grandmother openly wished she didn't exist. But no matter how small I felt in that house, I refused to let it show in front of Lila. I smiled for her. I celebrated every new word, every piece of artwork she brought home. I let her know, every single day, that she was enough. I tried to ignore Lorraine's visits. I tried to pull Greg back toward us, but nothing worked. The distance only grew. Then came the night I overheard Greg say those words. The night something inside me broke for good. And now, here we were. Days from Lila's 7th birthday. She was counting down the sleeps with the kind of joy only a child can muster. 7 more sleeps, Mommy, I can't wait. Greg barely acknowledged it. Lorraine had already made her opinion clear. You shouldn't waste money on a party for her. She won't even remember it. But I remembered everything. And this year, I had no intention of letting my daughter's light be dimmed by the 2 people who should have loved her most. I didn't know what would happen when Lila gave Greg that card, but I was done staying silent. For once, I was ready to let the truth speak, no matter the cost. I kept waiting for Greg to change. Part of me still believed that the man I married was in there somewhere, the one who used to rock Lila to sleep, who laughed at her little giggles, who once told me, "I can't believe how much I love this tiny person." But that man hadn't been around for a long time, and the man who remained seemed to grow colder with every passing day. After I overheard him say those words to his mother, "I want a son, not her slow little girl," I stopped trying to repair what was already broken. I started watching more carefully instead. It was almost like Greg had convinced himself that Lila's delays were some kind of personal failure, or worse, a reflection on him as a father. The next morning after that conversation, I watched him at breakfast. Lila, bright and hopeful as always, climbed into her chair and waved. "Hi, Daddy," she said proudly, words we'd worked so hard on in therapy. Greg barely glanced up from his phone. "Morning," he mumbled, eyes locked on the screen. I fought to keep my voice steady. "Lila worked really hard on her greeting," I said softly. "Didn't you, sweetie?" She beamed. "Uh-huh. I practiced and practiced." Greg gave a stiff nod, put down his phone, and walked out of the room. Lila looked confused. "Did I do bad, Mommy?" "No, baby," I whispered, hugging her. "You did perfect." I held her longer than I should have, and in that moment, something in me hardened. If Greg couldn't see the gift that was right in front of him, that wasn't Lila's fault. But I knew I couldn't shield her from everything. Things only got worse when Lorraine showed up again that week. I answered the door with my heart already racing. "Greg home?" she asked curtly. "He's not back from work yet." She pushed past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. I stayed close to Lila, who was sitting on the floor coloring. Lorraine eyed her with that same thin smile she always wore. "You really should think about what's best for Greg," she said in a low voice. "You're young. You could still have a boy. Why hold on to a mistake?" My breath caught in my throat, but this time I didn't look away. "She's not a mistake," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. Lorraine snorted. "You're being selfish. You want Greg tied down, raising a child who'll never be normal." I wanted to scream. Instead, I looked at Lila, blissfully unaware, humming softly as she drew little stars and hearts. "She is perfect exactly as she is," I said, louder this time. But Lorraine just shook her head. "You're going to regret this." When Greg came home later, I told him what his mother had said. He barely reacted. "She's just trying to help," he said flatly. "She wants what's best for me, for us." "No," I said quietly. "She wants you to walk away from your own daughter." He didn't answer. He just grabbed a beer from the fridge and turned on the TV. That was when I stopped talking to him about Lila at all. It was like trying to breathe underwater. Meanwhile, Lila's 7th birthday was fast approaching. She was counting down the days with excitement, sticking construction paper stars on the kitchen wall. Each morning, she'd point and say, "Almost time." I smiled and played along, but inside I was bracing myself. I knew Greg wasn't going to make any effort. Lorraine had already told him not to bother. One evening, as I was putting Lila to bed, she looked up at me. "Mommy," she whispered, "will Daddy come to my party?" I kissed her forehead. He said he would try. She smiled, satisfied with that answer. I wanted to cry. In the days leading up to her birthday, Greg barely mentioned it. No questions about presents, no offers to help. But Lila remained hopeful. One afternoon, she came bouncing into the kitchen. "Mommy, can I make Daddy a card?" I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to say no, to protect her from the disappointment I saw coming like a freight train. But her face was so eager, her eyes so bright. I couldn't crush that hope. "Of course you can," I said. "Let's get your craft box." She worked on that card for nearly an hour, tongue sticking out in concentration, using her best handwriting. At one point, she asked for tape. "What are you putting inside?" I asked gently. She smiled. "It's a surprise. Daddy will love it." My heart ached. I wanted to prepare her, to warn her that her daddy might not react the way she hoped. But I couldn't steal her belief, so I let her finish the card. I helped her seal it in an envelope. And I waited. I didn't know it yet, but that little card, taped shut with hope and love, was about to crack this family wide open. The morning of Lila's birthday arrived faster than I expected. Barely slept the night before, lying in bed, heart pounding. I kept replaying everything in my mind. The words Greg had said, Lorraine's threats, the look on Lila's face when she made that card. I was terrified. Terrified that the man who used to love our daughter was going to crush her little heart in one careless moment. But I was also done staying silent. That was my decision. The one thing I could control now. If Greg or Lorraine dared to hurt my child again, they would not do it without hearing my voice this time. No more biting my tongue. No more shrinking to keep the peace. I would not be the coward who stood by anymore. The morning light filtered through the curtains. Lila came bouncing into my room at 6 a.m., grinning ear to ear. "It's my birthday, Mommy!" she squealed, crawling under the covers with me. I wrapped her in my arms. "Happy birthday, my beautiful girl," I whispered, holding her tightly. She pulled back and said, "Do you think Daddy will like my card?" My throat tightened. "I think Daddy will be very surprised by your card." It was the truth. And in my heart, I was hoping it would be the kind of surprise that would finally wake him up, or at least force him to face what he had become. I helped Lila get dressed in her favorite yellow dress, the one with tiny butterflies on the hem. She twirled in front of the mirror, giggling. "You look perfect," I told her, and she did. My mother, Grace, arrived around noon with balloons and cupcakes. Her presence steadied me, as always. I told her everything over coffee the day before, about the card, the words Greg had said, and what I feared might happen. She looked at me and said simply, "If they hurt her again, you stand your ground. You have me. You are not alone." That was all I needed to hear. By the time the small party started, only a few friends and their kids had arrived. I kept it small on purpose. Less risk of an uncomfortable scene. Greg had promised to stop by. Lorraine was, thankfully, not invited. At one point during the party, I saw Lila clutching the envelope tightly in her little hands, eyes darting toward the door every few minutes. My stomach twisted every time. Finally, just after we sang Happy Birthday and cut the cake, the door opened. Greg walked in, sunglasses on, a neutral look on his face. He gave me a quick nod, then glanced around the room. "Hey," he muttered. Lila lit up instantly. "Daddy!" she cried, running toward him, card in hand. She stopped right in front of him, smiling shyly. "I made this for you." Greg forced a smile and knelt down to take the envelope. "Thanks, kiddo." My heart was pounding. Every muscle in my body was tensed. He opened the envelope, pulling out the homemade card. In Lila's shaky handwriting, it said, "Happy birthday, Daddy. I love you even when you don't love me." Taped inside was a small school photo of her, holding a sign that read, "I'm Daddy's best girl." The room seemed to go still. Greg's smile froze. His face flushed. He looked down at the card, then up at me. His mouth opened as if to say something, but no words came out. Lila looked up at him expectantly, eyes shining with love. "Do you like it, Daddy?" He blinked rapidly, still speechless. I stepped forward, voice steady but low. "She worked very hard on that card. She wanted you to know how much she loves you, even though you've made it very clear how little you think of her." He swallowed hard, still unable to respond. For once, Lorraine wasn't there to shield him. He had no excuses, no one to blame. He looked at Lila again, eyes glassy, then stood abruptly. I need some air," he muttered, shoving the card into his pocket and heading for the door. Lila's face fell. "Did Daddy not like my card?" she whispered. I knelt down, pulled her close. "Sweetheart, your card was beautiful. Daddy just doesn't always know how to show his feelings." But in my heart, I knew. He couldn't face what was right in front of him. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to say it out loud. That was my turning point. I had let Lila give him that card because I was done pretending, done making excuses, done protecting a man who no longer deserved it. From that day forward, my loyalty would belong to one person only, my daughter. And this story, Maya, was far from over. I stood in that room holding my daughter, my heart thudding in my chest. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel helpless. I wasn't ashamed of my silence anymore. I had found my voice, and I had just watched the truth hit Greg like a brick wall. When he walked out the front door clutching that card, it wasn't about needing air. It was about running. Running from the guilt he refused to acknowledge, from the little girl he had failed so completely. But I wasn't going to chase him this time. Lila pulled back from me, her big green eyes full of questions. Why did Daddy go outside? I smoothed her hair. Sometimes grown-ups don't know how to handle big feelings, but your card was beautiful. You should be very proud of it. She nodded slowly, still unsure. But when my mother called her over to pick another cupcake, she skipped away with her usual bright spirit. I stayed rooted to the spot for a moment, trying to calm my shaking hands. I had spent so many nights dreading that moment. The day Greg would finally wound Lila so deeply that no words could undo it. But it hadn't gone how I imagined. She had been braver than I ever was, and in a way she had forced him to face the truth I never could. A few minutes later, Greg came back inside. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He walked straight past the kids and other parents toward me. "We need to talk," he said under his breath. I followed him to the front hallway, just out of earshot. He held up the card, voice low and angry. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" I looked him dead in the eye. "It means exactly what it says. She knows. She feels it every day. Your distance, your coldness. You think she's too young to understand, but she does." His face flushed red. "You put her up to this. You want me to look like the bad guy." I laughed bitterly. "Greg, no one had to put her up to anything. She wanted to make you that card because she still loves you, even after everything. That should break your heart, not make you angry." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I didn't stop. For months, I stood by while you ignored her. I heard what you said to your mother. I know what you think of her, but she is our daughter, and whether you like it or not, she's worth more than either of us combined. His voice cracked slightly. I never meant for her to hear that. I was angry, frustrated. She heard it. And even if she hadn't, I did, and I won't let you treat her like she's less than. He looked down at the card again, running a hand through his hair. I didn't know she felt this way. "How could you?" I said softly. "You've barely looked at her in months." Silence stretched between us. For the first time in so long, Greg didn't seem angry. He looked ashamed. But that wasn't enough anymore. "You need to decide," I said quietly. "If you want to be part of her life, it has to be all in. No more half-hearted visits. No more cruel words behind closed doors. And if you can't do that, you need to walk away for good, because I will not let you hurt her again." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words never came. Finally, he let out a shaky breath. "I need time to think." "You've had time," I said, "but take whatever you need. Just know this. From now on, I will protect her first, no matter what." He nodded stiffly and left without another word. I watched him drive away, a strange calm settling over me. I went back inside where Lila was laughing with my mother and her friends. When she saw me, she ran over and hugged my legs. "Did Daddy like my card?" she asked again, looking up at me hopefully. I knelt down to her level, my voice steady. "Sweetheart, your card helped Daddy see some very important things, and you were very brave to give it to him." She smiled, satisfied with that answer, and went back to playing. In that moment, I knew I had reached my limit and my strength. Greg could choose whatever path he wanted from here, but for me, there was no going back. Lila deserved better, and finally, I was ready to make sure she got it, even if that meant building a life without him. For the rest of Lila's birthday, I stayed as present as I could. I smiled through the cupcakes and the games, hugged her tightly during the unwrapping of her small pile of gifts, and laughed when she twirled in her new butterfly dress. But beneath the surface, my mind was racing. Greg had left with no promise, no apology, no clear decision. And deep down, I already knew what his silence meant. I just didn't care anymore. Something had shifted in me for good. I wasn't afraid of him leaving. I wasn't afraid of what people would think. I wasn't afraid of raising Lila on my own. The moment he read that card, the words of a child who loved him unconditionally and chose to run, I saw the truth. He wasn't strong enough to be the father she needed, And I was done waiting for him to become that man. The next morning, I woke up determined. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt clear-headed. I called my mother and told her everything that had happened in the hallway. What Greg had said, how he had left, how I no longer trusted him to put Lila first. She didn't hesitate. "Elena," she said firmly, "you know what you need to do. And I will be with you every step of the way." With her support, I contacted a lawyer that same week. I told Greg through one brief, measured message, "I am filing for divorce. You are welcome to discuss visitation, but only if it's consistent, safe, and loving. I will not allow Lila to be hurt again." For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. Then one evening, a message arrived. "You were right. I can't be the father she needs. I won't fight you. I'll stay away." I stared at those words, hands trembling. I should have cried. But instead, I felt relief. Not because I wanted Greg gone. I didn't. I had loved the man he once was. I had built a life with him. But because this meant Lila would no longer have to carry the burden of trying to win a father's love that would never come freely. When I told her that Daddy would be spending some time away, she asked one simple question. Did I do something bad? I gathered her in my arms and held her close. "No, sweetheart, you are perfect just as you are. This isn't about you. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that have nothing to do with the people who love them." She nodded slowly and hugged me tighter. In the months that followed, I rebuilt our life, brick by brick. I filed for full custody, which Greg didn't contest. I started seeing a therapist to help me process everything I had carried in silence for so long. And most importantly, I focused on Lila. We celebrated every small win. We spent afternoons painting together, reading stories, baking cookies. I stopped caring about comparisons to other kids or what Lorraine, who never contacted us again, thought. I cared about the little girl in front of me, whose smile lit up a room, whose determination inspired me daily. Slowly, the shadows faded. Lila still asked about her dad sometimes, and I answered honestly but gently. Daddy loves you in his own way, but sometimes love means knowing when you can't give someone what they need. It wasn't easy. Nothing about this journey was, but I learned something powerful through it. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stand up again and again when the people around you expect you to stay down. And love? Real love isn't measured by perfection or milestones. It's measured by presence, by patience, by showing up no matter what. That was the lesson my daughter, my brave, bright, perfect little girl, taught me. She gave her father a chance to choose love. And when he didn't, she helped me choose us. So if you're a parent out there or someone fighting to protect the people you love, don't stay silent. Don't let anyone tell you your child isn't enough or that you aren't enough. The only love worth holding on to is the kind that sees, accepts, and celebrates you fully. That's the love I give my daughter every single day, and it's the love I finally learned to give myself. So that's our story. It wasn't the ending I once hoped for, but it's the one that gave my daughter and me the freedom and peace we both deserved. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that staying silent helps no one. Speaking up, even when it's scary, can change everything. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you courage or reminded you that you're not alone, I would love to hear from you. Please give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people find stories like this one. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below. I read every single one, and your words mean more than you know. And if you'd like to hear more real stories about love, resilience, and finding your voice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, for caring. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you love.